So without further ado, we're all here tonight. I wanted to welcome our guest speaker, Scinto. He is the Deputy Program Director of our StratCom program. He is the founder and CEO of Public Sphere. He has taught me, and I'm sure many of you know, and I'm very, very excited to have him here. And he's going to be speaking to us today about the role of communication in the world.
So, each year the Gallup organization runs a poll where they ask people which professions have the highest ethics. And each year, nurses, doctors, and pharmacists come in near the top. And unfortunately, each year, advertising practitioners, people who do what we do, come in near the bottom. In fact, 40% of people say that we have low or very low ethics. And we're right there next to car salespeople and members of Congress. And you might know some of the complaints that people have, that we make false and misleading claims, that we engage in spin, that we encourage consumerism, that we try to get people to buy things that they don't really need, and invade people's privacy. These are all real criticisms to think about. And I like, I'm a fan of the ancient Greeks. They were the first to study the art of persuasion. They called it rhetoric. And they had a phrase to describe what people like us do. They called it making the weaker argument appear stronger. And I think about that, and then I ask, what is our goal in the world? Are we just corporate shills? Are we just here to sell stuff? Or is there something more noble about our discipline? And I do think there is something more noble. And I think it requires personal development and broadening of our perspectives. So, last year we asked our faculty, what should our students be known for? And the phrase that came up was courageous impact. So our faculty think that you should not just be taking orders, but that you should actually be true advisors and counselors to your clients. And courageous impact means being authentic. It means saying what you believe and not saying things you don't believe. It means being well-intentioned. It means keeping the interests of our audience or our stakeholders, taking those interests to heart. Strategic communication is about communing with our audience. It's not about trying to deceive them. So I think that's something really important to keep in mind, but it does require a change of perspective. And I go back to the ancient Greeks again. The ancient Greeks had two different words for freedom of speech. And by the way, I think freedom of speech is really tied up in everything that we do. In fact, the Supreme Court of the United States largely considers what we do to be a matter of free speech, and they say that if the antidote to bad persuasion is actually good persuasion, that if you don't like what someone is selling, then you should sell something better, essentially. And so you might have heard of the phrase, the marketplace of ideas. That's something that the Supreme Court has used. But free speech is really important to what we do. And the ancient Greeks had two different words for free speech. One of the words meant equal access to the platform. So what we would call the right to free speech. The other word meant the courage to speak freely. And I think that's a really important distinction between having the right and then actually exercising it. And so to have more of a role in the world, we need to exercise some courage. I want to go a step further. Recently, we had our first meeting with our brand new Strategic Communication Advisory Board. We put a board together with leading experts in our field. It's cross-disciplinary. So we have people from public relations, from advertising, from nonprofit communication, political communication, government communication, a lot of different areas on this board. And just to give you a sense of the caliber of the people who are on the board, one of them is Chris Foster, who is the CEO of Omnicom's public relations group. He oversees 20 agencies. And the other members of the board are just as prestigious and impressive. And we asked them kind of a similar question, which was, what are you looking for in the ideal job candidate? And the interesting thing was that it wasn't technical know-how, although they do expect you all to know the technology that's important now. It wasn't analytics or strategy per se, although that's certainly an important part of what we do. Instead, the phrases that we heard were things like motivated curiosity, problem finding. So not just problem solving, but actually being proactive about what the next problem might be. Creativity. And generally a liberal arts sensibility. So, in other words, they're looking for people who have developed their human capacities, not just the skills or the techniques to perform the branding or the marketing. They want people who bring human capacities. So, I would encourage you to keep working on those human capacities. I like the mention of Toastmasters. I was involved with Toastmasters for a long time, actually made it to the top level of distinguished Toastmaster. Anyway, I really loved it. It revolutionized my life. But that's one of the things I would suggest that you work on, is your public speaking. Another thing that you can do is get involved with a humanitarian cause. Actually do something to support it. Get involved in politics. Use your skills to help others who have less of a voice in our societies. And be conscientious about the employers you decide to work for and the clients that you take on. Those things are not easy. I think all of those things require some level of courage. But there are things that you can start doing now. And I think the outlook for our industry is actually really good. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says that our industry is going to grow at 6% a year for the next 10 years. Starting salaries are twice the national average for starting salaries. And public relations in particular is still an excellent place for women. 70% of people who work in public relations are women. So there's a lot to be excited about in our field, and then there's a lot that we can do. And I think I'm going to leave you with this final thing, which is that as Columbia graduates, or even now as students, people are going to look to you for leadership. And the question is, are you going to meet that challenge? Are you going to be the leader that people are looking for? And to the old saying, to whom much is given, much is asked. So I encourage you to, as you develop your skills, as you develop your own careers, to continue to think about how you can use your skills to make the world a better place.
questions if you're okay with that.
Sure.
Side note, it's like really amazing for us to have Jesse here to talk to us. He has so much experience seeing students come in and out of the program, seeing them get placed in jobs. He has experience now with his board. He has literally people that are going to hire you. He sits and talks with them about what they're looking for. So I would really encourage you guys to use this time to like ask questions that you want to know. Like ask questions about communication and what you're looking for, because we can only speculate that he actually has access to those answers. And I'm always one to raise your hand at an opportunity. So I would love for you guys to ask questions.
Arthur, thank you for sharing your insight. I'm sure a lot of people resonate with this message, especially now we're on the job search. So I was wondering, as you're trying to continue building your skills, do you have any websites or resources or maybe even books or blogs that you regularly refer to just for ways to build your skills? Any resources you refer to often?
That is such a wonderful question. I wish you had asked me in advance so I could think about it.
You can think about it and we can email everybody.
Okay, yeah, I'll think about it. But I think a lot of the things that I come back to are things that we use in the program. Like concepts that I've learned in the program. I mean, I know you've all read or are reading Made to Stick. It's still a wonderful book about storytelling. It's still useful. The William Zinsser is still really useful. Those types of guidelines are things that I use daily, and I think that no matter what job you're in, whether you're actually counseling someone else or whether you work for an agency or whether 20% of our students don't work or 20% of our alums don't work in a communication role, actually work in some other type of professional role. And yet, I think that these skills that you're learning are still useful in those roles, because leadership is really about communication. I'll think of, I'll come up with a short list for you, okay? Hardy.
Do you have a particular memorable experience that has helped sort of shape the way you communicate? And if so, how did you add those unique characteristics to your life?
So I couldn't hear the last part.
And how did you add those human characteristics throughout your experience in that particular event?
So the most meaningful communication experiences that I've had have been times when I pushed myself and took a risk and took a chance. And this is something I talked about in our critical conversations class. The idea of critical moments. Moments when something that you do changes your life trajectory. And you don't always know it in the moment, but a good example would be if you have a romantic partner, think about how that has that one moment of the first conversation or whatever it was, how that changed your trajectory. And there's things like that in our professional lives too. So I was telling Mike was in the first class that I was a course associate for. This was way back, I shouldn't say the year out loud because I don't want to offend Mike, but that's where I had my first teaching experience. And I remember the first day going in, my heart was pounding because I was so nervous about it. But that, taking that risk changed my life trajectory. And so I think that, putting ourselves in positions where we're taking a chance, trying things, even if we feel very uncertain about it, those are always good things.
So I know a lot of us are looking at jobs and careers and maybe switching careers or going into the job force. Do you have any recommendations in I know we all have an idea of what we want to do, but how, especially as we're going through interviewing, one of the things I've learned about as they're interviewing you, you should be also interviewing them in the sense that, is this the place I want to be? Is this the industry that I want to be in? So in terms of that gut check, how would you give us advice in handling situations like that?
Like the interview, like
Yeah.
just having the right mindset for
No,
it?
but like in terms of like choosing a profession, choosing a career, like
Yeah.
about like that critical moment, I feel like a lot of us are sometimes just looking for any job. It's about, the career that you choose is kind of determines like your path. So how do you choose, because we can leave this and go into any industry, which is a great reason why we're here. How do you choose? How do you know like what is the right path for you, or what is the right
Yeah.
I'm choosing.
It's not always evident, right? Like, despite the fact that we're trying to make the best decisions for our lives, we don't always know whether we've made a good decision until years later sometimes. But, I think there's actually more time to decide than you might think. Like, when you first graduate, you feel like, oh, I gotta get a job now and decide. But you can get a job and try something, and then you might decide that it's not the right thing for you, and then you start the process of finding something else. Like, I don't think it's good to get in a mindset of like, I have to get the perfect job right now. I think it's more like, I'm gonna try this and see if it's a good fit for me. I also felt like when I graduated from the program, I graduated in 2012, so I don't know if all of you know this, I was a student myself in the program. I too felt like, oh, there's so many things that are so interesting, like research and insights. Wow, that seems really fun. I was very interested in public speaking at the time. That seemed fun. So it was kind of hard at first to decide, but I think that paying attention to what you're saying yes to. Sometimes we don't know what we think until we observe ourselves doing it.
So I do the public sphere from the internet. So it's like to help other people do public speaking better. So coming here from Indonesia, sometimes I'm a bit like when speaking in front of class, sometimes I have like barrier, and then it's like out of like not the habit of people in my country to like speak in the class. Do you know like what's the best solution? I mean, can you offer me solutions on how to be better at communicating or participating in the class, but and just like put away the old habit of not.
So I think it takes time to get comfortable. So the biggest thing is getting regular practice, and I think one way to do that is in our classes is just set your own goal. Like, I'm going to raise my hand twice in each class.
Because I know, like, I talk with my friends coming from this fall 2023. We come from like Asia, and like we have that, and then even we talk with our professor one-on-one about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's people have varying levels of comfort with it, and there's certainly a cultural aspect to it as well. But if it's something that you want to work on, then set achievable goals. And raise my hand twice, and whether it's just to ask a question or to make a comment, but then be regular with that. Like, you will, if you haven't raised your hand twice in class, you didn't meet your goal for yourself. But I think that constantly setting small goals and getting the practice is what's going to make it more comfortable. In the back there, and then.
Okay. I have a question going back to the conversation we had with our new advisory board. So the CEO mentioned some of the qualities they're looking for when interviewing the job candidates, and a lot of them are around like liberal arts sensitivities, and the person should pay attention to humanitarian causes. And for me, it can be a bit abstract. but it can be also be concrete. So I'm looking for if there's any examples that you can give us, or is there any narratives that those leading companies in the industry are looking for? Because I attend an event hosted by Meta on Tuesday, and they are talking about how the AI is interrupting our industry and how it's going to impact it further. They all mentioned, the people asked those panel speakers to do some predictions, and they mentioned that AI is eventually going to be all around, provide better services for humans, to understand better human psychologies, to make us the experiences better. But essentially, it can be also very abstract in terms of all the humanitarian topics. So I'm looking for if there's any examples, or do they go deeper when you're having conversations with that CEO?
Well, I think the idea is to be well-rounded. So well-rounded meaning that you have more interest than just strategic communication alone. And a good example is the visit to the ballet tonight. Right? You don't know what you're about to learn when you go there, and you might learn something that's useful in your work environment. And I think that that's what they're talking about, like making those types of connections, which AI may or may not be able to do. Probably not at the level that we're hoping for right now. So, yeah, you should definitely learn about AI and be able to use ChatGPT, but continuing to look elsewhere outside of our discipline for new ideas. There was an advertising guru named George Lois. He passed away recently. He had a book called Damn Good Advice, and a friend gave it to me. I was reading through it. One of the things he said he did all the time was go to museums. You go to a museum every week. And I think that type of thing it rejuvenates your human side, you know, to take in the arts and things like that.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I feel like I get to know you on a more intimate level, and thank you to the board for having you. I love that you started with the fact that our industry is kind of seen with a lack of ethics, right? That how we could be kind of swindlers, or just, wanting to make the sale. But then you concluded with, when you have this advisory board, what they wanted was motivated curiosity, problem finding, creativity, and the idea that us as Columbia graduates or being in this community, that we have a responsibility for leadership. So like when I think about motivated curiosity, problem finding, creativity, that's still centering what we're doing for the audience or for the consumer, like having that human compassion to what's the need. And I think a lot of times for a lot of us that are really gifted in communication and we're very persuasive, like finding that grounding where we keep our ethics and we keep that sense of who we are, and not using, because when you're persuasive it can go either way. And so how, in your experience or when you work with other communicators, like how have they solidified that core ethic even though they were really good speaking in a room, persuading an audience? Like how did they keep their core humanity in that?
Well, one thing that I think about is that, like, for those of us who work in corporate, and I used to work in corporate, I used to work in advertising agencies, the best case scenario is that we unite people with products and services that they actually need and want. So we're not overselling them, but we're actually helping them find things that they need and want. And I think that too is a noble endeavor. Like people do have wants and needs, and if you're helping them find what they need, that's a really important thing. I think that what I've seen is that as people get older and advance in their careers, they're more comfortable going against the flow, disagreeing with people around them. But to take an ethical stance doesn't necessarily mean disagreeing with people. It could also mean just questioning. Or when you think about a real counselor or advisor, you are actually doing your client a favor if you raise what you see is there might be some red flags. Like, yes, we could do that. My concern would be if this happens, or if it's perceived in this way. So we've seen a lot of examples of messaging that's perceived in a negative way, in a way that people never expected, and that's not good for anyone. That's not good for our clients.
Thank you.
Well, I just have one question. So let's assume if you wanted to start a conversation with someone who you may want to connect with professionally for any given reason, you want to hire them, you want to get hired, or you just want information, you don't know the person at all, and they don't know you at all. So what's the first thing that you can say?
The first thing that I would say is someone who I want to try to connect with. Yeah. Greetings from Columbia University. My name is. I mean, I literally do that. I did that just the other day. So I'm working on the Winter Symposium, which is our big event on January 19th. And I'm trying to get Josh Earnest, who was President Obama's press secretary for a couple of years, and now is the CCO of United Airlines. And that's what I did. I said, "Hey, Mr. Earnest, greetings from Columbia University," something like that, and then get to the point. But I think that, especially, knowing that you're coming from a learning environment, people are less guarded when they know that. And particularly if you let them know that you're a student, then I think people are more willing to give their time to students. Yeah.
I'm just curious if you ever had any office politics in a workplace.
Office politics
And how do you use it strategy communication?
at Columbia?
I know, and is that where you've worked before?
There's office politics everywhere. Yeah, I mean, every workplace that I've worked in has had office politics, and I have. Sometimes I'm successful, and sometimes I'm not. I mean, I think that if what we were doing was completely scientific, we would always know the result. But instead, there's always a human on the other side, and what we can do is try to increase the likelihood that we'll be successful, but we don't know that we will be. I've tried all kinds of things to try to bridge gaps, but, including like, hey, it seems like we have very different perspectives on X, Y, and Z. Could we find the time to chat? And just setting aside a time to talk to the person.
Again, thank you so much. It's really nice to always hear you talk about the communications. I was just wondering, did you know what you wanted to do after graduating while you were in the program? And kind of like adding to my almost question, if you have multiple passions, I guess, or multiple industries you want to go into, how do you choose?
So my main goal when I went back to school, when I entered the program, I was working for an Omnicom company called Harrison & Starr, which was a medical advertising agency, and I was in an editorial role. So, which meant like I read pharmaceutical ads, and including all the fine print, and which was an interesting job, and I'd like to find enough. But it involved a lot of just sitting in a queue and reading, and I wanted something bigger. Like I wanted to have some decision making. I wanted to have some leadership. I wanted to be able to travel. I wanted to be able to do other things. And so that was like one of the big reasons I went back to school, is to see like how can I pivot in my career to have some of those things. I wasn't exactly clear when I came out like what was going to be the fastest route to that, but I knew that I had like this feeling inside, like, oh, I really want to be the teacher. I really want to be the teacher. And that feeling, I knew I had that feeling, and so when I was invited to be a course associate, it was like, yes, I want to do this. So I think it's partly like just kind of listening to yourself. I have a friend who says like, whenever you feel professional envy, that's actually a good thing because it lets you know what you want. Like you see someone else doing all the great things, that means like you want that. And then you have to think about how to get there. And the second question about different sectors, that's a little bit harder, but maybe by consulting you could work with people in different types of organizations. So like through my consulting, working with public sphere, worked with someone at a big criminal justice nonprofit, I worked with someone at an energy firm, so different types of firms, but similar types of challenges that they had. I mean, they both needed help with their leadership communication, and that's something that could help them. Did you have, are we over time? How are we doing?
We have 2 more minutes. Last question.
I did kind of on a tangent, but since you're a former Toastmaster yourself, I felt like this was a great opportunity. If you could just kind of tell everyone about the benefit of attending.
I do feel that Toastmasters revolutionized my life. So before Toastmasters, I could count on my fingers the number of times I'd spoken publicly because it was so rare. I was terrified of it. I tell people when I was in college, I never raised my hand. So the thing I'm telling you to do, I never did when I was in college. It was only as I got older that I started, to develop that confidence. So, and I feel like Toastmasters really helped. The most important thing was the regular practice, so meeting every 2 weeks and taking a speaking role. So even though the Columbia Club is strong and a lot of members, you would probably have fewer speaking opportunities just because it's so big. But there are more than 200 clubs in New York City, so you could start like poking around, and I would suggest like trying a few different clubs before you decide which one to join. And all you do is you take turns with short speaking roles. I mean, the first speech is 4 to 6 minutes, and it's completely voluntary. You sign up when you're ready to sign up, but I encourage you to do it because the practice is what helps.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.